Welcome to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast, a show chocked full of strategies for scaling your speaking business. Now here's your host, coach to the industry superstars, Jane Atkinson.
Well, welcome everyone to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. Today we are talking to Neil Gordon about turning your message into a movement. Love that idea, Neil. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jane.
So you have an interesting background in publishing. Tell everybody a little bit about your background and how you came to be a consultant like you are today.
I have, as you just said, a background in book publishing, which was essentially being a lowish level editor at Penguin quite a number of years ago, where I worked with New York Times bestselling authors. One of the more famous books I worked on is A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. Admittedly, it wasn't just me working on it. My boss was the more powerful presence when it came to some of the nuances of that particular book. Anyway, right. What I'm supposed to say next is that I always loved reading as a kid, and I was a real bookworm, and that I went to a fancy college, et cetera, and none of that is true, Jane. Because I hated reading.
Really? Wow.
Oh, I was very proficient at it as a young child, like a 4 or 5 year old, at least for my age.
Like you picked it up really quickly. Yeah.
Picked it up I don't remember not reading.
Okay.
Right? This was never a struggle for me. And then the further I got into my education, the worse my reading comprehension became.
Oh, interesting.
And so we tested it every year, and I still have the printouts from a long time ago. In first grade, I was in the 98th or 99th percentile for reading.
Yeah.
And by 7th grade, I was in the 54th percentile.
Interesting.
Yeah. So this all becomes relevant when I graduated from college, still hardly ever reading anything at all, even stuff I was required to read for school.
Yes.
And I started discovering these light commercial fiction novel type experiences. And then one book in particular called A Prayer for Owen Meany by John Irving. It was such a mind-blowing, worldview shifting experience just reading that novel that I started questioning everything about what I believed about life. And that intensity led to me having just as intense of a curiosity about how language could do that to me, how the written word in this case. And so I spent the next couple of years analyzing everything I could get my hands on, including a lot of other John Irving novels. And on the other side of that, I came out with some very green, very entry-level insight into how to make the written word more effective. And I got a job at Penguin as an editorial assistant, worked my way up to assistant editor. And that was the journey. It was my lack of proficiency that led to making it my life.
Oh, that's so interesting. Okay, so you come out of that and you have an idea that I have something that I can share with people. There's probably a couple more steps in there to where you landed today. When was the light bulb moment when you thought, oh, I think I can help people in this particular way?
Over the few years I worked at Penguin, more and more grew an affinity for nonfiction and specifically how-to books.
Yes.
And when I left Penguin, I was just kind of floating around. I didn't have a massive network. I didn't have other people who leave the industry. They have such a good network that they can get all sorts of freelance work or something like that. And that wasn't me, but I was hustling to find some things. This is before the days of Readsy, and this is before the days of Upwork and stuff. So it was harder to make the gig economy work. But a couple of months after I left, I got a ghostwriting job for a short how-to book for a nonprofit organization. And all of a sudden, everything that I had ever struggled with or tried to figure out or had some sort of process with all came together. And I was just able to race through writing that content. And I ghost wrote a handful of months later, I ghost wrote a book proposal for an author, and we got him a 6-figure advance with that proposal. And I started to realize that I saw this kind of how-to world in a certain way, and
Yeah.
that was the beginning of me realizing that this is what I was supposed to be doing and contributing to others.
Okay, I love that. So turning your message into a movement, I think is just such a cool idea. I'm
Mm,
always having my clients visualize that 6 months after their presentation, or maybe
right.
6 years after their presentation,
Mhm.
people are sitting around the boardroom table and they're using your language. And
That's
I think
right.
that that is super cool. Um, what do you think is the most common mistake that you see professional speakers making when putting together their talks?
This is a very important question to ask, Jane, because it's a very specific and precise mistake based
Hmm.
on a flawed belief around
Okay.
what makes for an amazing talk. And this
Okay.
happens, and I want people to understand, I want to normalize this. I've seen wildly famous people getting paid multiple tens of thousands of dollars to speak for 45 minutes, making the same mistake.
Okay.
The belief that these folks have is that information is what drives value on stage.
Information drives value, and we want to kind of put an X through that. Am
We
I
want to put an X through that. Exactly.
okay? Information drives value. Okay, say more.
What this looks like practically is they might have 45 minutes to speak at a conference or something similar. And they take that time to spend equal time on 5 or 6 or 7 different tools or pillars or steps,
Points. Yeah.
tips, points, whatever it is, components of a
Okay.
larger system.
Okay.
And I really want people to free themselves of that belief that they need to cram in as much stuff as possible,
Let
because
more is not more.
more is not more.
Okay.
More is unfortunately a problem. Now, why is that? We're in the information age. We have everything we need in our pockets. We can get
Hmm.
access to anything now in our devices or another or a computer, whatever it is. People aren't going to an event for information.
What are
They're
they going
going
for?
for change.
Okay.
Now, people might think, well, yeah, they need the information to create that change. Eventually, people need information through a book or an immersive course or working in depth with a consultant, however it might be.
Hmm.
However, they're not going to pursue any of that information if they don't think it's going to work for them. When you have
Or
45 minutes or 10, I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
or if they're overwhelmed because they've
Exactly.
been inundated with so many ideas that they don't know which one to actually take action on.
Exactly. And this is a really important point you just made, Jane, because let's put this right now. My wife is looking to go to a conference. She's into animal behavior, cat behavior specifically, and she's looking at this conference and trying to figure out which day to go.
Hmm.
And there's going to be at least 6 or 7 presentations each day of that conference. And she's just going to be choosing one. But even within those 6 or 7 presentations, if each of those people gave her 5 or 6 or 7 things to learn and integrate on top of all the other things they're doing that day, how
Right,
much of it's going to stick? It's so overwhelming amidst a time that is already so overwhelming.
right.
And my wish for speakers is to do away with that belief that information is what drives value and instead drive their entire message strategy, their entire talk by the belief that empowerment is ultimately what drives change. And the way you empower people is to convince them that change is possible.
Mm. So would it be fair to say, and I'm spitballing here, so you tell me if I'm wrong. I've always, and I have a book called The Epic Keynote, and we've talked about the super simple speech formula.
Mm-hmm.
Opening story, three key ideas, closing story. I think what you're saying is that everything should come to just like one simple idea or action item. Am I getting that right? Or
That's
is
very
it
astute. Yeah.
okay? Yeah, is that I because I'm wondering if maybe it's, and sometimes it's not three ideas, sometimes it's just one.
I tend to encourage people to move to one, and it's not to say that there isn't room in a, let's say, a keynote length talk like 45 minutes, that there isn't room for your three components.
Right.
I'm
Okay.
talking about a reworking of the cadence or the structure, so that if you
Okay.
have 45 minutes, maybe the first 25 or 30 minutes, you're building strategically up to that one big idea that gives
Hmm.
everyone the hope that they can do this. This is the key to solving this problem, this one thing. And
Yeah.
now here are a few things for you to integrate and take steps with and experiment with, so as to make that big idea actionable.
I love that. And I really like the idea of, you know what? All of us out here in the world, we're selling hope. And I
That's right.
just ran a 5-day challenge last week and I had a little post-it up to myself, make them feel hopeful. So I think, okay, so you have a tool that
Mhm.
you think speakers could make greater use of. Tell us about that.
I'm going to start with an example from a book, actually, and
Okay.
I'll then transition into speaking as well, because we have examples in all sorts of aspects of persuasive communication. When you open a book written by the co-founder of Pixar named Ed Catmull, he wrote this book
Mhm.
about 12 years ago, I believe, on called Creativity Inc. It was a New York Times bestseller. It's been a perennial staple of business books in the years since.
Yes.
And when you open a book on the Kindle network, it aggregates all of the time someone highlighted certain passages. And what I've found over the years is that invariably the most highlighted passages in any nonfiction book are a certain kind of sentence.
Okay.
And in Ed Catmull's case, because I want to give very concrete examples, he says about a quarter of the way into the book, getting the team right is the necessary precursor to getting the ideas right. And as I haven't looked in a while, but I think it has over 10,000 highlights. Not
So
10,000
that's like
copies
a
sold
bumper sticker that could be the emphasis of the entire book, right? I
of
mean,
the entire
everything
book.
everything could come back to that. So chapter one, do this, and that's the bumper, and that's the line. That's and I've heard it called through line. I've heard it called phrase the page. I've heard it's called all kinds of things.
Mm.
But I love this idea of your message becoming a movement because if you can whittle it down to that bumper sticker, then people can latch onto something and remember it, and maybe they have a coffee mug that has it on the side that they
Mm.
take home with your URL on it. There's so many things you can do to really help. And I would say don't be afraid to put that out front in your marketing because it's probably not a bad message. Do you want to say something about that? Like, are we hiding this? Are we keeping it a secret until they arrive?
It's funny when you were saying that just now, Jane, and especially the mug. I have a client in particular who I took through this process. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes this sentence, I call it a silver bullet. Sometimes this
Okay.
sentence is longer. The longest one I know of that I really like, at least, is Dan Pink's silver bullet in his famous TED talk on the puzzle of motivation. He said, the secret to high performance is not rewards and punishments, but that unseen intrinsic drive to do things because they matter. Right. And that's, I think, 21 words long.
Yeah, that's
My
not maybe not
yeah,
mug worthy.
maybe not mug worthy. You could also take a long silver bullet and get it shorter. And I want to be very clear that there are no hard and fast rules here.
Right.
However, if you can get your sentence down to just a few words, that's potentially going to be of mug worthiness. And
Yes.
I funny because my client, where we came up with her silver bullet, and she's the best example of everyone I've worked with in terms of the movement really getting widespread, like speaking to many thousands and these large organizations. And the silver bullet is connection mitigates trauma. Very simple.
Connection. That's so
She puts
good.
it, they put it in the signature on their email, they put it on their swag, and she loves swag, so it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And I never would have advised her to do that originally,
Oh,
because
interesting.
I think of it less like a tagline and more of a recipe that you bury in and you give them some context for it. However,
Right.
it is undeniably meaningful to the people who consume it. There's even those retractable banners that you bring to an
Yes.
event, and
Yes.
there it is, connection mitigates trauma on the retractable banner. And so I would say that when doing this sort of work, it's so important to always remember that every situation stands on its own. If you have this super concise sentence, then maybe it becomes mug worthy. If it's longer, like Dan
Mm.
Pink's, maybe you find a different way to attract people on the
Maybe it's
outside.
poster worthy.
Maybe it's poster worthy. Yeah, exactly. With the
Well,
cat hanging from the thing because Friday's coming, and then
I
oh yeah, the
like
secret to high performance cat. Yeah,
I like how you worked your wife back into it there.
yeah. There you go. Yeah, she'll be happy.
So it's interesting that, your idea of what you would and would not have advised. This is the same as my own, Neil. Some of the things I thought 5 years ago have
Mm,
drastically changed.
yeah,
And so, would I have said, put your through line? I would call it a through line or a phrase that
sure.
pays potentially. You call it a silver bullet. I like that because it really is a silver bullet. Would I say put that out front in your marketing? Sometimes these things just take on a life of their own,
That's right.
and you need to be listening, but also, I think, very intentional when it comes to developing this idea. What is the one idea that is going to spur people to action? What is the one idea that is going to give them hope? That's what we need to narrow it down to. And it could be that you have, you know, 100 little mini points, but they all come back to this one idea. I think perhaps 100 mini ones is a little bit too much, but who are we to say what's the
Right.
exact right thing and the exact right formula? That's why the super simple speech formula is like, okay, well, this is just a starting place for people who are looking to design a keynote. Okay, tell us about like your favorite transformation story among your speaking clients.
I would say that this same client is my favorite because it was such a dramatic transformation
Like
in
once she
that,
nailed this line, connection mitigates trauma.
right, once that happened, she things went from struggling for her in the testimony. I want to just honor her story, and so I will only speak to what she says in her testimonial, in that
Mm.
she she speaks of how people were just dismissive of what she meant to contribute, and she just really was struggling to reconcile the fact that even though she understood, this is in the aftermath of the pandemic was technically just resolving itself in 2021 when we first started
Okay.
working together, and she had been seeing this whole thing play out for over a year, and it's like people really need to understand this, and it was just going over their heads, or they were just dismissing her, or whatever it was. They just weren't taking this idea seriously.
Okay.
And from a speaking standpoint, she would just speak for free or for these honorariums or what have you. And as she describes in the testimonial, after this, her speaking fees
Oh,
tripled. And she just started instantly getting traction and getting these contracts engagements with these large organizations and whatnot, and just got this massive night and day thing where there are so many people who are so invested in this message that it
mm,
has become a movement.
that's
And
beautiful.
so it really never gets old thinking about how just a slight adjustment. I didn't make her a physician. I didn't give her her master's in public health. I didn't give
Mhm.
her decades of knowledge and expertise. We just adjusted it in a relatively short amount of time,
To
and
be
then
more
everything changed.
succinct and more memorable and
Yeah,
more into a
accessible.
movement. Accessible. I love
Yeah,
that. Connection mitigates trauma. So let's talk about your book for a second, and then we'll wrap up with maybe a couple of more tools. Tell
sure.
everybody the name of your book.
The most powerful sentence of all time, a fable
Okay.
about persuasion. Yeah.
I love that. Okay. And do you get into the type of things that we're talking about today there?
Yeah, this really focuses on that messaging strategy. There's references to speaking the main client who's helped in the story because it is a fable. The main
Okay.
client starts on stage and people are taking out their phones and tuning her out and she's just up there feeling like a fraud. And then the
Mm.
journey she goes on with the expert she meets leads to her not only finding this sentence, but then needing to get more specific. She had the bigger idea. Now she needs to make a pitch to a major client to really get this innovative software off the ground.
Okay.
And so the journey is about finding that idea and then what is the ideal way to create context for that idea. So it can be inclusive of speaking and then all sorts of other ways of being persuasive as well.
And we have a lot of people listening who are authors, so I think
Exactly.
that there's a lot there for them. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk just simple tweaks speakers can make to their talks that
Mm-hmm.
might have a pretty significant impact on their audience.
This would rank in the top 5 for my favorite transformation stories, perhaps ranked after the client I just described to you.
Okay.
This is a gentleman who, a long time ago, when I was first more actively marketing myself to speakers, this would have been in 2017, he
Okay.
saw my free webinar. He eventually became a client, but not until after he already made a tweak to his talk that led to him getting 11 new speaking gigs from that one booking. 11. He
Ooh,
says in this testimonial is 8, but then what I know after the fact, after he made that testimonial
it was
video, he got
more.
a few more. Yeah, exactly. And this was not from me helping him. This is just from a tweak he made from a concept that he saw in the
Okay.
webinar.
So was it getting clearer on the concept?
It was, well, I'll just tell you what it is.
Okay.
It's just kind of funny how simple it was. We love our solutions when we go up on stage or in any situation. We've worked for years on developing our expertise and we
Mm-hmm.
love our solutions and we want to share them. We go up on
Mm-hmm.
stage and we start talking about our solutions. And that's very well meaning, but it skips over something very important. And so the tweak is what he learned that he could do that led to such a night and day transfer. He used to get maybe 1 or 2 new speaking gigs from each booking, maybe
Right.
3, but then he gets 11. And the reason for that is because before talking about the solution he had for them, which is what this sentence might be, he first was explicit about naming the problem that that particular audience was desperate to solve.
Oh,
Because people are most likely to embrace our solutions when they're provided within the context of a problem they care about solving.
yes.
And it's important that that particular audience cares about that
So
particular
he
problem.
hadn't been naming the problem.
He'd just been skipping right ahead to the solution. And people like that. But when they hear that this is a solution to thing that they've been actively trying to solve for themselves, they're like desperate to connect. And they're like, we really need to talk, which is what he
Okay.
describes in the testimony. Is like, we need to talk. Like it was
Okay.
like,
That's cool.
so if nothing else, I would say people like to ask me for a tip if I'm talking a networking thing. And that's the one I start with. I don't start with the silver bullet because the silver bullet has more baked into it.
Okay.
But our listeners and viewers could start doing this tomorrow. They can just name the problem. They have to probably
Mhm.
interview their client beforehand. Like, what are you
Of
trying to
course,
solve
they need to
for?
find out the pain points.
Exactly.
And then would we ask them if there was one, maybe this is the question for the pre-conference questionnaire that you send out. If
Mm-hmm.
there was one problem that everyone in the audience could identify with, what would it be? Like they're going to tell you kind of
Mm-hmm.
all their pain points, but maybe they could say everyone would agree that this is a thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting process to go through prior to the talk. And what I've seen with my clients is that some speakers are standing out because they give multiple sessions prior to the speaking engagement to speak with the client. They'll
Oh,
not
I
meet with them
see.
just
They're doing
once.
their homework. They're doing the research.
They're doing the research, and part of that is meeting with them. And so what I
Yes.
recommend to our listeners is to offer, maybe if you have a first session, you do the intake, and maybe you do the questionnaire like you just said, and you get all the information about what do they think, and then maybe in the second session you reflect back after reflecting. It sounds like everyone's common pain point here is this.
Can we agree? Yeah.
Can we agree on that? And
Yeah,
then
that's good.
that will not only validate your concept, it'll
Yeah.
also build even greater trust with your client leading up to the event.
I love that. I love that. Well, Neil, you've been a treasure trove today. If people want to connect with you, are you a LinkedIn guy? Do you want them to go to your website? What would you like them to do?
My website, neilcanhelp.com, tends to be the best place to reach out to me.
Okay. And let's
And
specify that Neil is Neil.
that's right.
Neilcanhelp.com, right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And best place
Wonderful.
to get more content, I like TikTok. I mean, I'm on all of them, but TikTok, you're more likely to see me because the algorithm likes me a little more there.
That's
So
funny that you say that. You're this kind of Brooklyn guy, and you're that I wouldn't have I wouldn't have imagined that.
I'm gonna
So
do a dance number for all you
yeah,
guys.
there you go.
Here we are on TikTok. Yeah.
No, I really like that. Okay, that's to be discussed on another episode of the
There you
Wealthy
go.
Speaker Show. Neil Gordon, thank you so much for sharing your gold here today with us. I think you gave us a couple of really, really strong pieces that people will be thinking about. If you're new to us, listener, make sure you go over to speakerlauncher.com and click on the podcast, and you can get all of our entire history. You'll see there's a blog there as well. We recently ran a best speaker video contest. You can check that out. And if you haven't already read it, check out The Wealthy Speaker 3.0. I plug everybody else's books. I should be plugging my own, right? So check out The Wealthy Speaker 3.0, and that is on Amazon. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you again, Neil, for being here. And with that, we're going to say, see you soon, Wealthy Speakers. Bye for now, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. If you need help scaling your speaking business, head over to speakerlauncher.com and chat with us.